Almost 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, lucky you.
And then
Okay.
Costa Rica after that.
Oh, really? You
Yeah.
go over to Puerto Rico and fly over from there?
No, Miami.
You have to go back.
Miami to St. Croix to Miami, and then Miami to Costa Rica.
And who in Costa Rica do you go visit?
A friend of mine from Pike, New Hampshire.
Oh, nice.
She's there already. She's been there for the whole winter.
Wow, it's a lovely place to visit. Well, why don't we get started? I'm going to run the meeting as your chair, vice chair. Jerry, our fearless leader, emailed me or called me and left a message saying that he was out of power and couldn't get on the internet. So I'll take over and run the meeting, and we'll start with introductions. And I'm Bill Emmons from the town of Pomfret. So we'll.
Right, so if it's okay, I will do the roll call and
Okay,
people will know who's here and on the phone.
that's right.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, so you can check me off, but go ahead.
Steve Coda, Paul Valley,
Here.
Carl Russell, Nancy Jones,
Here,
Marcy Carver, Marlis Eddy,
here,
Lynn Bertram, Gwyn Zakov,
Here.
John Binhammer, Carl Pepperman,
Here.
Tim Odell, Peter Berger, Mark Belisle, Monica Collins, Lori Hirschfield, Bruce Riddle,
Here.
Charles Jeffries,
Here.
Dave Ormiston, Frank Tegetoff,
Here.
Larry Scott, Rod Francis, Jeff Lubell,
I'm here.
Sarah Gallagher,
Here.
Ann Brown,
Here.
Jim Allen, and Bill Emmons is here. Phil Deckert, Ramsey Papp,
Here.
Annie Mackay,
Here.
Dune Hendricks,
Me too.
okay, David Brandow,
Here.
Bushrod Powers,
Here.
Ira Clark,
Present.
Deb Jones, Bill Edgerton, John Echeverria,
Here.
Jesse Anderson, Jim Masland, Jim Clark, Michael Saka,
Here.
Kevin Rose,
Here.
Bill, oh, sorry, thank you, Bill Bayless, Nancy Malmquist,
Here.
Don Borden, and Brad Prescott said he was not going to be able to come. Is someone here from the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Commission? Okay. Andrew Winter,
Here.
Meg Emmons, Dan Rudell. Okay. And then for staff, we have Peter Gregory, Kevin Geiger, Tori Littlefield. I think I saw Jeff Martin, and Sage is here.
Yep, I'm here.
Is there anybody that I missed, either that I haven't called or you didn't get to say your name?
Timothy Odell is here from Corinth. I joined a couple of minutes after you started calling out names.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. And we do have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Lori. Well, welcome, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order, and would like to see if there's any public comment, or first of all, I want to do the agenda. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to discuss about the agenda? Any additions? Any questions at all? And being that it does say introductions, but I haven't chaired a meeting since we were in person, so we used to do it that way, but I think we all know who we are because we got pictures and names, so there you go. I would like to ask if there's anybody from the public not associated with Two Rivers as a commissioner that would like to address anything that is not on the agenda to be discussed this evening, and would like to have the floor for a few minutes. Okay, nobody from the public, then very good. So we'll move right along, and the first item on the agenda is a public hearing. And I will open that right now. It's the to discuss the proposed Tonbridge Town Plan and review and the confirmation of planning efforts there. So I'll turn that over to a staff member to start the discussion. Peter, is that would be Sage?
Yeah, the public hearing is typically for members of the public. And then during the action item, which is item 4, that's when the staff will make presentation on each of those things, if that's all right.
Okay, that's always the way it's been. And so if there's anything that the public would like to talk about here at this point, this is the time to do it. You have the plan has been included in this attachment that we're looking at. Are there any questions, any items on that plan that's proposed? Okay, I guess I'll have to close the hearing since there is nothing to hear. All right, so then I will close that public hearing and we'll open up the hearing for the Tonbridge determination of energy compliance. Is there anything that anyone wants to discuss regarding their determination of energy compliance? Okay. I don't see any waving hands. Laurie's the master of the waving hands. I don't see any. Do you? Good. Okay, if there's no discussion there, we'll move along then. I'll close that hearing. And now we will go to item 4, which is an action item to the Tonbridge Town Plan approval. So I would entertain a motion to approve the Tonbridge Town Plan as presented. Is there anybody else?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second.
Second.
Very good, Nancy. Thank you. Now there's discussion. Peter, I'll turn it over to you or to
Sage. Yeah, Sage, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself. Is this your first board meeting?
It is, yeah.
It is. Why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit and then get into the Tonbridge Town Plan, if you don't mind.
Hi, I'm Sage. I'm a planner at Two Rivers. I just started in January. So as for the Tonbridge Town Plan, Kevin worked extensively with the town to develop a new town plan. The 2021 town plan is an improvement from the 2017 plan. It now includes recreation with the utilities and facilities chapter. More strides have been made toward broader access to fiber optic cable. The wildlife and forest resources section was expanded, and a timeline noting actions and responsibility for implementation was added. All of the recommendations from the 2017 town plan review, such as including air and rail, including a capital budget, including the Tonbridge Municipal Energy Summary Worksheet, and explicit stating of sound forest and agriculture practices were added. Yeah, and as far as anything that could be updated further, the child care provider services could be expanded. And the plan lacks a little guidance on encouraging economic growth. But other than that, the town plan is approved as it is from my review.
Okay, thank you, Sage. Nice to see you. We haven't met, but I'm glad that you're a part of Two Rivers. So is anybody that would like to discuss further this, the conclusions from the staff? Okay, being none, then I would call the question and ask for motion to approval of the motion to accept the town plan. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Or do we need to go from one to the next and do it that way, Peter?
I'm not sure. Kevin, our parliamentarian, do we
Nope.
have a,
No,
I've
no,
seen-
you can just say aye
Good.
or wave your hand or whatever, and then Lori can, but then count the nays too, and then Lori
Good,
can
okay.
figure out.
Okay,
if the-
then raise your hand and wave it if you have your video on and say aye. All of those that, aye, okay.
Aye.
And those again, the nays? So moved. Okay, it carries. Very good, thank you. Now then, I'd entertain a
Oh,
motion.
I
What's
see
that?
John Echeverria's hand for some reason.
Can I abstain?
Yes,
Yes, abstentions, yes, I'm sorry. And those abstain, and we have one, okay?
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, it carries. Then now I would entertain a motion to approve the confirmation planning effort, the planning effort for the town. Is there a motion to that effect?
So moved.
And a second? Could we have a second?
I'll second. Sarah Gallagher.
Oh, good, thank you. And discussion. This basically is about the town's efforts in planning. Have they followed the state's requirements for planning, and do they have planning commissions? Have they had the appropriate number of meetings? Have they done it right? And basically, I believe they have. But that's for you all to vote on. So if anybody have any questions about it? Being none? Those in favor of the of approving the and confirming the planning efforts of the town of Tonbridge, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And any abstentions? Okay, so moved. Now then, I'll take a moment here to ask for a motion to approve the energy compliance for the town. Do you all understand what that is? I'd love to have somebody else explain it, but it
I'll
means
get
that
into it.
they've done their due diligence and they've added a chapter in their plan that addresses the very important issue of energy and all the issues surrounding energy and use and all of that. So go ahead, Kevin. Thank you.
yeah, well, once we get a motion on the floor there.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the energy compliance?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion now, a second.
second,
Very good. Lori, you getting all those names? I suppose she is.
Yes, she nodded.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Kevin? Did
Okay,
you-
so what we issue here is what's called a determination of energy compliance. And for those who remember, our regional plan has that given to us by the State Public Utilities Commission. And now we can do it to our towns when they come before us. And that having a determination of energy compliance gives you a higher standing in reviewing 248 projects, which in general in our region are going to be solar fields. And so in your package is our review, our draft review of the plan in terms of determination of energy compliance. We fill out a checklist about that and make sure that they have everything in there that's needed. The big things is they have to have a series of maps that we provide. They have to hit the energy goals that we have provided. And Jeff's going to talk about the new version of that later. And then they have to basically do several things. They have to have statements on transit, on reducing the use of fossil fuels, on conservation of energy, on thermal issues, and they've done all those things. That work was pretty much done 2019 and early 2020, and then everything went kaflooey for a while, but the plan was later adopted by the town. So any questions on that? I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Kevin. Okay. No questions? All right, then the motion to approve their energy compliance or determination of energy compliance is on the floor. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Waving hands.
Aye.
Those opposed? And any abstention? Being none, the motion carries. Okay, very good. I think that takes care of the Tonbridge Town Plan approval process. And we'll now move into the December and January financial reports, which have been attached and reattached again. I think we got a couple of different ones this morning. So if you get the latest one, entertain a motion to approve.
So
So
moved.
moved.
And a second.
Second,
Thank you.
Can I ask who did the second? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Tim Odell seconds.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Tim. Very, very brave of you. Okay, I'll turn this one over to Peter.
Thank you, Bill. So you've got December and January. We've completed now 7 months of our fiscal year. I'd like to note that in January, we received requests for scholarship payments, 7 out of the 10 that we awarded. And I think in February, we've now paid the rest of them. So we have now awarded all 10 of the scholarships that we awarded back last spring. So that's good news. The commission's income is as expected and strong. We're a little bit ahead of our income projections for the time period because we get an advance payment from the Agency of Commerce, as you all probably know. Receivables are in very good shape. They tend to be high on a month-to-month basis, but we have pretty much caught up. And I think in February, we received many of the receivables that were listed on the January report. So I think we're in good shape, and there's really nothing unusual that I want to draw your attention to. But I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you have on either of the reports or our finances generally.
Very good. Thanks, Peter. Are there any questions on the financial report? Any thoughts? Nope. Very good. We have a motion to approve. It's been seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? And abstentions? Being none there, the motion carries. Thank you all very much. Now, we will, I'll entertain a motion to approve the board minutes from December 15th, which you have in your attached packet. There they are, I think. It's a motion to approve. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. And a second?
Second.
Very good. Okay, now discussion. Anybody have any thoughts, questions on the minutes? Okay,
If I may, Bill, I think I can't find them in this huge packet here right now, but I believe the title on the approval of the minutes that we did in January was incorrect. I think Jerry pointed that out to me. Lori, could you confirm that? We approved the right set of minutes, but it was just the title of that agenda item in the minutes.
well, the title would have been TROC board meeting. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, approval of minutes, yes, I think, or like that.
I don't see.
Or, so actually it was financial reports, item 5. The title should read acceptance of unaudited September, October, and November minutes, because that was a meeting in December, so we did not do December, but the motion was correct. So we will make that correction.
All right, make that correction.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad somebody picked that one up. Good. Any other questions that it might have on the minutes for the that board meeting? Okay, motion to accept. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed
Aye.
and abstentions? There are none, so that motion carries. Thank you all very much. Now we scroll back up. Okay, now item 7 on the agenda is a presentation on the climate action plan and the comprehensive energy plan. Kevin will tackle the climate action plans for starts, I think, and then we'll move on to to Jeff Martin, who will address the comprehensive energy plan. So somebody's waving their hand.
I see Gary Durr.
Yes, I just joined. I just wanted Lori to know I'm here.
Oh, very good. Anybody else that's just showed up? Okay. Thank you for doing that. All right, then I'll turn it over to Kevin.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. So hopefully you are seeing a PowerPoint with some snowy trees on it right now. Is everybody seeing that? Good. I didn't make the general PowerPoint. I've modified it. I don't really believe that this picture is in Vermont by the looks of it, but maybe it is. Anyways, so I'm going to talk about the Climate Action Plan, which the state adopted, or the Climate Council, I should say, adopted at least last December. And now it is a series of recommendations that goes to the legislature and the Agency of Natural Resources. And I'm going to whip through it. And it intersects the Comprehensive Energy Plan, which Jeff is going to talk about separately, but they are different documents. It is quite a big document. It's 270 pages or so, as is the Comprehensive Energy Plan. But if you skip through all the beginning stuff, then you get down to the meat of it, which is similar to other plans like ours in that they have what they call pathways, which are ways to meet the climate goals, and then strategies, which are more specific ways under there, and then recommendations or actions, they call them both in the plan. And as I go, you'll see some stars along things. And those are the areas that I called out that I think are most relevant to our particular work. This just shows you what they did and how they started. And they worked all last year, and they adopted the plan in December. And then there will be updates out there. As they note, the plan is kind of an initial cut. And so in some places, if you're reading the plan, you may go, did they edit this finally? And they're definitely trying to get it done. So they're going to be coming back to this thing for sure. Do you all see like the little people square that I see in my corner, or no?
No.
Good. I have you there so I can see some of you, but it'd probably be disconcerting. So anyways, why do we do any of all this? For those of you who are at the December board meeting, you certainly heard from Eric Osterberg. These two slides are from the Climate Action Plan, excuse me. And they basically show that in the 70s and stuff, when I was younger, we hardly had one day that was a hot day in the summer. And now we're moving up towards a series of hot days and then potentially a series of hot weeks or even months out there. So that heat is a big concern. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the things that to the right of the little dotted line are the things that we expect to be happening more. And the higher you go up that, the more confidence that we have. So extreme heat is actually the highest confidence thing that we expect more. Not so much flooding, which is the next one down, really under extreme precipitation. And then below that, we even have wet storms. And so ice and snow are, at least ice and snow events that bother us are going to be coming, is the idea. This is where we are on the emissions reductions. So we've kind of done a little bit better, but we need to do a lot better out there and keep cutting that down a lot over time. And that's really the bulk of the Climate Action Plan, is how to drive down emissions. I wanted to call this out because it's kind of appropriate to us in particular. And this talks about the sinks of carbon out there. So what's sucking up carbon, and what they call AFULO, or agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. And so you can see agriculture actually gives us a little bit. They're actually not a net sink. They're a net positive bit of carbon. They're releasing carbon out there. But forests are sucking up carbon. And that's why it's a negative number there. But that negative number is not what it was in 1990. That negative number now is smaller. And so that's a product of a couple things of they're actually starting to be less and less forest is one of those. But they need to figure out why their models are telling them that too. They have noted. So these are the big places where they go. Emissions reductions is the main one, and I'll talk about that especially. I wanted to call this out too, because in the climate action plan, whenever we talk about doing things, they want to talk about them in terms of cost benefit. They have not run a full cost benefit model, but they have a qualitative evaluation of things right now. And you always measure future benefits compared to current costs on what they call a net present value. And so you discount that, and you use a discount rate to do that. And depending upon the discount rate, whether you're 0 to 3%, things look a lot better. And so they're actually going to use a 2% for the climate action plan. But if you used a 0%, you could see, wow, everything's cost beneficial, because it costs you $2,000 a ton to be emitting carbon, which is about how much when you drive 2,500 miles. So if you're like me and drive 10 times that much, you have about a $20,000 bill to the environment for emitting your carbon just driving, not your oil furnace and everything else. If you use the 3%, on the other hand, you have a $500 bill. And so whatever that number is an important number as we go forward. The equity lens is important on every project that we're doing now, and the Climate Action Council spent a lot of time on equity, and there's actually an equity bill now in front of the legislature and stuff. But the biggest thing here is ensuring that those most affected and least able to deal with things are properly thought of in the climate action plan. And in particular for us, that will be rural populations that require transportation that don't have access to transit. And so if you have somebody, driving a long ways to work, they've got an oil furnace in their basement, those are things where, as we try to meet the climate action goals, how are we going to help those people get over the hump? So these are the areas I'm going to talk about, and I'll talk about them each as we go. But transportation is number one. Big thing for those of you who've done your town plans around energy. The big thing on transportation is electrifying vehicles. And that little green car shows how many cars we have compared to where we need to be. And all the purple cars is where we need to be in 8 years from now. And then we need to basically do all this again at that scale 8 years after that. And so there's a lot of vehicles that need to be done in terms of electric vehicles out there. And of course, if we're going to have electric vehicles, we need charging stations and we need other things to make them go. But we also need that equity piece. How do people go buy that electric car? That's not something you do willy-nilly. And you see the star down here, that's around EV charging. We're not doing that much around actually buying electric cars from people, but we are working a lot on charging stations, and we'll be doing a lot more, I imagine. Heavy duty trucks are now coming into the picture. Several years ago, the thought there was to run them on biodiesel, and now the thought is to actually run them on a combination of things, but especially electricity as that comes into play. So we have very, very few heavy duty electric vehicles, and that'll be a big thing out there coming, especially school buses. And again, parking spaces for those things and where to put those things is a planning thing.
Kevin, can I say something?
Yes.
We had Ben Walsh from Beeford at our Energy Committee meeting a month or so ago. And he said that the proposal is to have a lot of money in for e-school buses and also an equal amount for transportation conventional buses. And he said the Scott budget does not have money in it for e-school buses.
Is that a question?
No, it's a comment.
Okay. Yeah. Good, because I don't know the answer to that question.
What we're asking for is to write letters to your newspaper to get money into the proposal for e-school buses. And a conventional school bus costs $280,000. An e-school bus costs 2.5 times that much.
Yep. Yeah, and school buses are, from a practicality point of view, they're pretty good for electricity because they park someplace and then they drive. They're not driving all day and then they park again. And they have big flat roof if you want to do solar installations on them, which you can
Right.
build solar into the bus.
And he said, and we're trying to become in Randolph, a net zero emission town by 2030. He said, you aren't going to make it unless you get e-school buses.
Good. And Jeff can talk about that maybe a little more later. He may know some more about that, but duly noted, Gary. Transportation, of course, out there all over the place in our work, and smart growth, not having people all spread out, having people along transit routes, having transit routes, reducing vehicle mile travel. That's what BMT is out there, increasing public transit, rail, complete streets so people can walk or bicycle, again, fits all into our current work. So that's transportation. Then thermal or heating, but in the energy field, we call it thermal a lot. And so that's both heating and keeping the heat inside the building. So on the heating side, it's transitioning more to heat pump or geothermal or other ways to heat buildings, some wood heat in there. And on the keeping the heat inside, that's the weatherizing homes. You can see on the chart what we've done, what we said we were going to do, which is obviously a lot more than what we've done. And now what we need to do to catch up and what we're on pace to do. So we're behind the curve on that. The obviously we have to do massive weatherization. I'll have a numbers on in terms of contractors soon. What it does in terms of heating, it talks about what they call a clean heat standard versus more regulating what you do with heating, and that's one of the things where we in Two Rivers may be differing a little bit. There may be room to regulate the actual construction of heat plants inside, especially new buildings. So if somebody's going to build a brand new building and they're going to put an oil furnace in it, and the whole idea is in 8 years or so, there's not a lot of oil being put into furnaces. Well, somebody's going to have a fine furnace at that point. They're going to be like, well, wait a minute, where's the oil? Where's all this stuff? Might as well say there are cost-effective things that you can do now instead, and put those in new buildings instead. We're obviously going to have to deal with all the legacy oil furnaces out there, but that is a different way than a clean heat standard. The clean heat standard is a proposal, and I have a chart on that, which looks like this, which is kind of a complicated chart. But the idea on the clean heat standard is you put it on the bulk fuel providers to figure this thing out. So instead of working on the bottom end and going, don't put in an oil furnace, put in an electric heat pump or something. This way you tell the oil providers, you're not going to be selling a lot of oil in the future, or you're going to be somehow buying a bunch of credits to deal with all the oil you're selling in the future. And then the oil providers will supposed to figure this out and make this thing happen. It's a bit strange. Some people go, oh, well, the oil people are just going to pass on the costs, of course, to the people down, you and me down there. But the climate action plan actually is a little vague on that point. They say perhaps the fuel providers will pass on the cost, and I don't really think there's a perhaps in that statement. On the weatherization side here, you can see we're going to need 1,000 workers, and then 2,000, and 3,000, then 4,000, then 5,000 in a couple of years. New workers in the trade, and so that's going to be a huge lift for the trades and the education system to get those people out there, so we can start hitting our targets in terms of weatherization. A lot of crews, you see, adding 300 crews and 400 crews and 600 crews and 800 crews. So if you know any people who want to get into weatherization, there's a huge opportunity there. On the electric side, so that's transportation, thermal buildings, electric, which is the electricity we use, that we're doing quite well on as a state. We're pretty much on target to be carbon free in terms of the generation of electricity. To use all this electricity is going to take some work, though, because right now in the region, there are parts of the region, especially if you're at Chelsea Tonbridge, where we can't put a lot more electricity onto the grid. The grid's kind of full. And the more we have electric cars or buses or other things, the more it'll pull power off the grid, and they'll be able to put more power on the grid. And a lot of our houses are not 200 amp service out there. So new houses especially, but old houses will need to upgrade to 200 amp so that we can put in those fuel pumps and run them, heat pumps, excuse me. But there'll be a lot of load management as well in the electrical field. This is where we get into things a little more with what we do, which is really to me, general planning. It's around adaptation and land use. So not having everybody all spread out. So the energy picture is not everybody driving, because that's energy no matter how you cut it. But also helping our habitats, helping species move, all that type of helping carbon stay in the forest, helping agriculture keep carbon in the ground. And that compact settlement pattern, which is state land use goal #1 out there. These, as you can see from the pages, if you were to go through the the climate action plan, excuse me, I would start back in the hundreds, skip the first 100 pages or so. And that work back in there is more along the lines of the things that we're going to be doing. But again, as you all know, land use pattern is a driver of energy use, particularly transportation. Building, of course, are where the thermal use comes in. And then they have parts like this in the plan, which really, I think, are them thinking about the land use planning structure in the state and talking about it. And so they say, these inconsistencies comprise the ability of the state to implement a land use policy, because everybody is doing everything piecemeal out there, right? And if an adaptation and resilience strategy is deemed essential, which of course is essential if we're going to meet our goals, it's necessary for the state to figure out if that system's going to work. So that's certainly one of the things coming, is there is thought about what are our goals? Is our current system of land use planning helping us to meet these goals? If not, what's the state going to do about it? So that directly obviously impacts our work. And I think the best way we can be back in that conversation is to go, yeah, we're meeting it. We're helping you meet your goals. We're an effective way to meet your goals. And again, we understand that land use planning is interconnected to nearly everything. But you can see the part that I've bolded, that, create thoughtful land use planning. You go, well, that implies that we're not creating thoughtful land use planning right now. So we better get on the stick there. And it does relate to the biodiversity crisis out there as well, because as we've talked about with our forest planning, species are going to need to go up. They're going to need to literally move north as they can. And again, you can see page 188, more towards the back.
Hey, Kevin.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're going to get to it now. Did they talk about trying to, expand housing near jobs so that people don't have to drive as far?
They do down under this what they call cross-cutting pathways. Yes, they recognize the intersection of housing and this is that it's not just a tight house that doesn't use a lot of oil, but it's where you put the house, and that there needs to be more housing available. Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's and they recognize, and I think I have it somewhere in here, that a lot of that is also going to depend upon maybe some infrastructure to support that housing.
That's kind of where I was going, because it just seems to me that you have a lot of infrastructure money from the infrastructure bill and from the ARPA, right? And you have climate goals, and one of the best ways to achieve your climate goals is to expand the number of housing units that are close to where your jobs and where your services are, so that people can walk to work and bike and don't need to drive as far. So you would think that it would be a nice way to line all those things up. And I'm a little worried this plan is so diffuse that maybe that gets lost, but you've read it more carefully than I have.
Yeah, and it makes your brain hurt if you read it long enough, I would say, because it is diffuse, and you're like, wait a minute, why couldn't they have boiled? I know with housing, you're always saying, like, give us the top 5. Well, exactly. Here they've given us like the top 200 and some actions. The one thing this plan does not, you will not find the word taxes in all 273 pages of this plan. And I don't know where the money's going to come from besides taxes, since that's where all money comes from eventually for government programs, from the feds or from us. But to support that level of infrastructure, we are going to need significant levels of taxation. You get the money back in some ways because you have sewer and water and you have compact growth and you have vibrant communities and all those type of things. But yeah, it's going to take a bunch, and it's going to dwarf the ARPA money. The ARPA money is nowhere near enough money to even deal with our current problems, let alone future problems. Yes, Gary.
I know that Woodstock has a bill going forward for a vote of, or to raise $680,000 to deal with this problem. So
Which problem?
global warming
Oh, okay.
and meeting our requirements. They're not goals. So taxes, if we're going to meet the goal, the taxes have to go up unless we get more and more money from the federal government, which seems unlikely to me.
Right. And again, back to that thing on discount. Right now, the social cost of carbon is a real cost. You know, there's a real cost out there. We just haven't been paying it. Depending upon your discount rate, I should be paying somewhere between $500 and $20,000 a year forever going forward. You know, that isn't like do it for 10 years and we're done. That's as far as the eye can see to meet those goals. And that money's going to have to come from somewhere. Exactly. There is, as you can see here on the 6th bullet, maybe, increased support for planning. All of this is going to take planning and thinking. If we want more creative land use planning and we want to tie the goals better out there, we're going to need more money to do that. And so that bullet's out there, increased municipal planning grants. They have a long standing kind of thing that's been talked about in Vermont is whether we need a state planning office to kind of bind all those disparate groups out there. That's a big question. My particular version of that is we don't, in that we have state planning goals. The statute kind of binds us. We just need to kind of do what the statute tells us to do. And that will take somebody, you know, paying attention and making sure that we're doing it. I think Two Rivers is actually doing quite a good job on that. And some of our brethren out there. You gotta move this thing so I can see. Hang on a sec. And Act 250, there's, as Peter talks to you about, there's a lot of Act 250 in play here as well to try to drive settlement closer together. Climate and energy planning funding, obviously that's us, that helps pay for Stephen's position right now. Supporting electrification of municipal fleets, again, that's us. If towns are going to be buying electric vehicles, just like a lot of things that towns buy, they're going to be looking to us to help them buy. You know, how do you do an RFP? How do you do procurement? What's the better one of these things? Where should we park it? All that type of stuff out there. They are talking about potentially putting in weatherization and efficiency navigators at regional planning commissions, people to help people get through this weatherization process a little bit, because, you know, everybody doesn't know how to do all that stuff. They're also talking about climate positions and natural resource positions at regional planning commissions. So there's new funding potentially coming up. I'm sure Peter will keep you abreast of that. But some new funds for staff going forward. And of course, the issue will be, will they keep doing it? Because this is not, you know, we'll do it for 3 years and then we're done type of stuff. This is, we do it from now on. There is stuff about resilience projects, which go back to our transportation work. Every time we're doing culverts out there or bridges or buyouts or that type of thing, those are all resilience and adaptation projects. And again, farmland conservation, we need to keep farms and forests as much as we can, so we can keep the carbon back in the woods and in the fields. So methods about doing that, you name it, we would be involved with that. Just moving another thing. And they're talking about A&R potentially taking over river corridors. Right now, by law, towns have floodplain regulations. There is no ability for the state to just take all floodplain regulations. However, Vermont has this river corridor thing that you know about, where we kind of monitor how the rivers move, and that's the very lateral erosion. And whether or not the state might actually come up with an authority there. So you need a state permit around that. I'm not sure that's a great idea, but certainly more needs to be done to address that risk. And so what's going to happen now? Right now, the legislature is trying to take pieces of this. The law says that once the climate action plan is done, that they will send it over to the Agency of Natural Resources and the legislature, and that the legislature has to pick the things that will meet the goals and implement them and adopt them. And so that's what the legislature is trying to do. As you can imagine, they have several bills in play to try to figure that thing out. I expect that at least we will see a few changes to maybe the planning statute around this, as well as some positions and a lot of stuff that is more kind of in the planning phase. A lot of stuff more that says, okay, now we need to figure out X in order to get this thing done. A lot of data needs to be crunched out there. So any questions on that? I can't see you all, but if you talk, I'll see you, or Bill can see you, or Lori can see you, I'm sure.
No questions? There's a
What?
lot to it.
There is a lot to it. And again, you know, we read these, as I always tell people, we get paid to read this big stuff. You're welcome to. I'm sure Gary's reading it. But if you kind of wonder, like, what's this mean to me? Give us a call, and we will probably have digested it somewhat. And so next up is Jeff. Again, the comprehensive energy plan intersects this. Yes, Gary, I can see you.
Yes, when we asked Ben that question, Ben Walsh that question a couple of weeks ago, he said concentration on the municipal bill, and he said concentration on the transportation, and you'll be doing your job. So that's what we're doing. We're also working with nearby energy committees like Bethel.
Yep.
All right.
So Jeff, you've got it. Do you have the share screen power?
Let me find out. Looks like I do.
Oh, wonderful.
All right. I'll share my screen. Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Jeff Martin. I'm the Intermunicipal Regional Energy Coordinator at Two Rivers, for those of you that haven't met me yet. And so I'm going to give an overview of the Comprehensive Energy Plan. And so the Department of Public Service is required to produce a comprehensive energy plan for the state that covers at least a 20-year period, and to revise the CEP every 6 years, the comprehensive energy plan every 6 years. So I believe the first version was in 2016. And so this is the first revision of the comprehensive energy plan. Kevin, am I right on that? Peter?
I think
right?
there was a 2011 one, but it was kind of cardboard.
Yeah.
So the 2016
All right,
one was
first
the first
real version, I guess,
yeah.
in 2016. So the big change, I think probably the biggest change to this version of the CEP is that it has to be consistent with the climate action plan. So it really focuses on greenhouse gas emissions as the main driver for the strategies and actions that are in the each energy sector in the CEP, and that's a pretty big change from the first version, which was much more focused on renewable energy. So this is a nice Venn diagram that's in the CEP that shows obviously what's unique about the climate action plan, what's unique about the comprehensive energy plan, and where there's overlap. So I won't talk about the climate action plan since Kevin just went into detail there, but in terms of what's unique about the CEP, it looks exclusively at energy, so it doesn't get into adaptation and non-energy emissions. And it includes an electric plan for the state. And it also talks about energy system planning, including adequacy, security, sustainability, and affordability and economic vitality of our energy systems. And then, of course, standards for local planning, Act 174. Then there's definitely a lot of overlap. Both plans talk about cost-effective greenhouse gas reduction targets. There's energy sector analysis, as Kevin just went through in the climate action plan that's included in the CEP. Talk about public engagement and equitable transitions. So these are the requirements and the goals that are in the comprehensive energy plan. As I mentioned, this version of the CEP is structured to meet the greenhouse gas requirements of the Global Warming Solutions Act. So that's what you see at the top there. And then there are sector specific goals that are designed to help meet those greenhouse gas emission requirements. So in transportation, the goal is to get to 10% renewable energy in that sector by 2025. So that, that's only less than 3 years away. So really, they're talking about light duty electrification, so EVs for passenger vehicles. And then by 2040, 45% renewable, and that'll be a combination of electric vehicles and again, like Kevin was saying, some biodiesel and maybe hydrogen for medium and heavy duty vehicles. In the thermal sector, by 2025, we need to be 30% renewable. That'll be a combination of electric heat pumps and wood heat. And so you see that 2025 is a big year. We've got a greenhouse gas emission requirement and then 2 sector specific goals in 2025, just again, less than 3 years away. So there's a lot of work that has to be done in the near term to meet those objectives.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did you say that wood heating is part of the goal?
Yes, wood heat would be considered renewable in the thermal sector under the comprehensive energy plan and with the climate action plan as well.
Okay.
Does that include Rygates and Burlington Electrics and that kind of wood heat, wood power?
So no, this is the thermal sector. So this is just for heat.
Okay.
In the electric sector, so I'll talk about that in just a second.
Okay.
But yeah, I'll talk about that right now. So in the electric sector, the change, I think probably a big change is the goal now is 100% carbon free as opposed to renewable, and that's a big difference in that biomass being used to generate electricity would be considered renewable. But it's not carbon free. So so that there's a shift in the metric or the standard in the electric sector to focus on carbon rather than renewability. So equity, big focus of the CEP as it is in the climate action plan. The CEP focuses on 2 categories of energy inequity in this case. So the first is energy burden, and that's the percentage of income spent on energy expenditures. So your electric bill, your heating bill, and gas for driving. That can be as high as 20% on average. So an average family in some communities is spending 20% of their income on energy expenditures. So really significant cost. So that's a big piece of what we mean by energy equity or inequity. And then within energy burden, some categories of people are experiencing more burden than others. So renters are far more likely to experience energy burden than homeowners, and non-white Vermonters far more likely to experience energy burden than white Vermonters. The other category of equity that the CEP looks at is the adoption of clean technologies. So thinking about solar and electric vehicles and heat pumps. Most of that adoption has happened in communities with low energy burden. So that means that the communities that would benefit the most from clean technologies are least likely to have adopted those technologies, primarily because of high upfront cost and just a lack of targeted incentives. So the key recommendations from the CEP to address equity is first to make it a core criteria in all decision making that guides energy policy in the state. DPS should complete a review of energy related public processes and recommend changes to encourage more inclusive and transparent engagement with Vermonters. And then the one that'll impact us the most is Act 174 Enhanced Energy Plans. Should include analyses of the potential equity impacts of proposed policies, objectives, and goals in the plans. Transportation and land use, just in the interest of time, I'll skip this. It's pretty much the same as what Kevin was talking about. I will just mention because Gary brought up electric school buses. I don't know anything about the state's plans for funding, but I think the infrastructure bill has a lot of funding for electric school buses. So that's something to look out for.
Jeff, there's also a northeast bill for e-school buses, but I think it is in the Biden Build Back plan that hasn't been passed.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is a carve out within the infrastructure bill that is for electric school buses, which is good. Thermal sector, breeze through this too. It's basically the same policy program recommendations that are in the climate action plan. We talked a little bit, net zero ready new construction standards by 2030 is something that's recommended in the CEP, but no real recommendations for enforcement beyond kind of leave it to towns to enforce, which is not enough. So hopefully that will change in the future. And then Kevin had the mandatory 200 amp service for new construction in the electric section. I put it in the thermal sector just because it probably belongs more in the electric sector, but I was thinking about heat pumps and having the ability to install heat pumps. And so that's something that the CEP recommends considering at the next code update. That I think is another 4 years off, something like that. So it's still a ways out. So maybe something that towns could consider requiring in their zoning regulations. Electric resources, this is what the CEP spends the most time on. Because we're really leaning on electrification to achieve our emission reductions in the thermal sectors and the transportation sectors, it's really important that our electricity supply is low or no carbon. Otherwise, we won't meet the targets. So the current renewable energy standard, like I talked about earlier, requires that Vermont utilities are 75% renewable by 2032. This CEP is calling for a revision of that renewable energy standard to get to 100% carbon free and potentially also 100% renewable by 2032. So that's a significant change. The CEP recommends considering developing a community solar program to make access to renewable energy more equitable. So community solar is when you develop a large array that multiple individuals or families can sign on to, and that can lower the cost of the array. And the program that the CEP envisions would be targeted towards people with low income and renters to try to address the equity issue there. So it's something that hopefully materializes and would be really a good opportunity for us to bring community solar to our towns. And then finally, encourage more detailed proactive planning around the siting of renewables. And what they mean by this mostly is that, in the past, we've focused on siting of renewables in terms of land use. And while that's still very much important, there are also constraints on the grid that need to be considered as well. So the grid was designed for the centralized generation of electricity, so big power plants that transmit power to their end users. And now we're seeing an increasingly renewable and distributed grid. So generation's kind of sited all over the place throughout the state. And a lot of our electric infrastructure wasn't designed for that. So there are certain parts of the grid that can handle a lot more renewables and other parts that can't. And so to avoid having to make really expensive upgrades to the grid, the updated standards for enhanced energy planning includes consideration of these grid constraints. So RPCs and municipalities will be expected to work with our utilities to make sure that we're encouraging renewables in areas where the grid can handle it and where it's less expensive to site them, and discouraging renewables where the grid can't handle it. So this table shows what the grid constraints look like in our region. So the first column shows how much solar was installed as of 2020, so 38.7 megawatts. And then the second column shows the optimized solar PV distribution, basically how much solar the grid can handle in our region without really significant upgrades. And then the next three columns show our targets for existing solar and new renewables. So, by 2035, our target is higher than what the grid can handle, at least what the grid can currently handle. And by 2050, our target is significantly higher than what the grid can currently handle. So these are definitely real challenges that we haven't really considered in the past in our enhanced energy plans, and need to carefully consider now to make sure that we keep the cost of adding renewables to the grid down. So finally, the updates to the Act 174 standards. The updates are effective as of January 14th. So all plans that are submitted after the CEP was issued need to meet the updated standards. But if you initiated the planning process before the CEP was published, you don't have to meet the updated standards. So I think if your town's thinking about working on or updating your enhanced energy plan, probably makes most sense to wait until the guidance and the data and all the mapping is finalized. I'll get to that in my last slide. The updates are on the department's website. They're also, I think, in the agenda, and they include streamlined language, enhanced consideration of climate and grid resilience, equity, and advances in technologies, and updates to the mapping standards to emphasize the value of forest lands in sequestering and storing carbon, consistent with the climate action plan. So finally, just the timeline. I won't go through each of the milestones here, but I think we can expect that by July or late summer, all the tools and the mapping will be complete, and that would be a good time to consider updating enhanced energy plans.
Yeah, and Jeff, if I could jump on that, just to remind folks, so what we have now is a standard that your plans have to meet, but we do not have the maps and the data at the Regional Commission to help you meet that standard, and we won't have that until July. So again, if you've been doing it for a while and your plan's just about done, you're kind of grandfathered. But if you're going to start now, and we have some towns starting their plans now, you won't have that, and we won't have that until later this summer. So just think of that as going forward.
Okay. Put us back on the, there we go. Does anybody, thank you, gentlemen. Yes, we have one hand flying out there, Gary. Yeah.
Yes, we have a couple solar projects going here in Randolph right now. And we got into a huge problem with the language that we have in the current town plan in terms of the legality and meeting the 25-degree slope kind of thing. So you really have to have an expert when you're rewriting those enhanced energy plans. I mean, seriously expert lawyer who understands this stuff.
Yes. John.
Jeff, I'm curious what the energy plan says about electricity storage in Vermont.
Yeah, it talks a little about that, particularly in terms of the grid constraints that I was talking about as one way of dealing with those constraints. So storage is a piece of that. They also talk about managing electric loads. So making sure that we're not charging all of our electric vehicles at the same time that people are getting home from work, and peak demand times. So there are multiple ways of dealing with those grid constraints, and battery storage is definitely a piece of that.
this is Tesla wall batteries, small scale storage, or are there any large scale storage
Yeah.
ideas?
They didn't get too much into large scale storage ideas. I think we probably will need that, but the CEP doesn't talk much about that. They're focused more on distributed, smaller scale, like you mentioned, Tesla power walls type things.
Well, the grid will be taking advantage of the private Tesla wall hung batteries because they're going to be able to drain down to a certain degree percentage of that battery's capacity when indeed they feel they need that extra power on the grid. So there is that is a collective amount of electrical storage that the grid can rely on. But I don't know much about the large scale part of it. That sounds sort of intriguing to me, but who pays for all of the upgrades to you mentioned constraint on the grid, and basically what you're talking about is 3-phase from 2-phase, I think, and that's all lines, and that's a huge investment. And for how does that get tackled by the public service department?
I mean, right now,
some of that's regional and some of that's state. That includes a lot of planning by ISO New England with every state, including Vermont.
Yeah, that's true. And in the Two Rivers region, most of the constraint is on the distribution side, so Green Mountain Power, and less on the transmission side, Velco. So it's right now, if a solar project is proposed that would require an upgrade, that project has to pay for that upgrade, and so that effectively makes it impossible to put new renewables in certain areas. So the CEP talks about potentially ways of dealing with that and spreading out the cost, but doesn't provide any solutions yet.
Well, our town of Pomfret doesn't have has one line that goes about a mile to a ski area from another town, and that's the only 3-phase we have. So that kind of rules out any large scale solar projects that might be shoehorned in somewhere out of sight somewhere. Anybody else have some thoughts or questions that you'd like to pose? So Jeff, thank you very much. Yeah, we have a question.
I see Paul.
Yeah. I'm just, Kevin, you brought up a good point. Where is the funding? In all these plans, there doesn't seem to be a funding element where the towns are having this plan placed on their laps. We can't continue to tax an aging demographic, especially here in Bethel. We have, we only have limited access to taxable income. And so why is there not an element of funding to make all of these things happen, to help the towns make all these things happen in the designated timeframes?
I think because it's a lot more easy to wish for things than to actually get them done, and because that's going to make somebody uncomfortable at some point, because somebody's going to have to pay that money, and people who don't have money, it's nearly impossible for them to do it, of course. I think the thing that's important for folks to understand, though, is there's a lot of money getting spent right now, and we can move that money around. Vermont spends tens of millions of dollars on gasoline every year that goes out the door. And so if we weren't buying the gasoline and we were doing other things, we were buying electricity with it, it's a different way to spend money. And so I think there'll be a while where we're kind of moving how you pay around versus necessarily how much you totally pay. It may look a little different, but there is going to need to be taxation, exactly, Paul, to get us over this hump, and whether that's federal money coming down and somehow the Fed's taxing it, or user fees, or the state, or I don't see towns really taxing things.
I think I think people are hoping that the Build Back Better gets passed, which is trillions and trillions of dollars to take us to the next stage.
Yeah, and having watched that on the transportation side, and it's a lot of money on the Build Back Better side. You have to understand though, the bridge and road money on the Build Back side will not even keep pace with bridge and road degradation. So even if all that money passed, things get worse. So the amount of money to get this stuff done is absolutely enormous.
Very good, Kevin. And Jeff, thank you. Anybody else? Final chance for any more comments or questions? Appreciate that. There's a lot there. Get those links, save them, take a look. Good luck reading it. Only small doses at a time, I think, you can handle. But anyway, if you have any questions, please reach out to these two gentlemen, and good luck with it. Well, let's move on to the staff presentation on the draft communications and outreach plan. Peter, who would this be?
Tori.
Tori, and
Tori. Good.
before you start, Tori, if you don't mind, I would just like the board to know that Tori is going to be moving on to the next chapter of her professional life. And this is probably the last time you'll see her at a board meeting, unless she comes as a private citizen because she enjoys these meetings so much. But if not, we wish her well and thank her tremendously for the work she's done for Two Rivers on planning and grant administration and emergency management and a host of things. So, Tori, we're going to miss you.
Great, thank you. It's a fully remote job, so I'm sure you'll see me marching around the King Farm if you come over here. So I'm here to talk to you all about the outreach and communications plan that I've been working on over the past year. I fully presented this to the executive committee a couple weeks ago, but I'm just going to briefly go through like the main portions of it. So agenda for this presentation, which will not be long. So I'm just going to talk about like why we're making this plan, what it's going to do, what are the goals and objectives, and then how are we going to measure our success once this goes through. So why should we make a communications and outreach plan for Two Rivers? So as we all know, we helped our town and our region and our state, so why shouldn't we be shouting this, from the rooftops? We need to let people know about all of the work that Two Rivers is doing. And we also want to be better at how we communicate with our stakeholders, which, as you all know, we work with a ton of different people. So we want to educate the public, educate our stakeholders on what we do. We want people to appreciate the work that we do for our towns, our region, and our state. We also want to inform people about what type of work that we do as well. And then, of course, we want to expand our network of communication. So more people outside our region kind of know what RPCs in general do, but also more importantly, what Two Rivers is currently working on. So what will this plan do? So throughout the plan, we're going to define the strategy for this organization and how we communicate with anybody outside of the office. We're going to identify the roles and responsibilities of staff. So while there's individual staff with specific roles, but as the office as a whole, we all need to try to be better on communicating out our work. We're going to use our communication tools for internal and external communications and outreach, which there's a bunch of different tools that we currently utilize, but we definitely want to expand that. We want to broaden the general public understanding of local and regional planning, develop educational engagement opportunities with municipal officials, provide stakeholders with the latest news and updates from Two Rivers, as well as tactically handle crisis communications with municipalities and state agencies with pre-prepared messages, protocols, and draft content for our websites, our social media, and other areas where we release information to assist us in responding quickly and efficiently to natural disasters that hit this region. So the main components of the plan, which I'm not going to go through each of them today, but we start off with, what the purpose of the plan is, goals and objectives, roles and responsibilities of staff and also you as our board. There's some baseline metrics in there so we can kind of measure our success going forward, how we're going to implement the plan. There's a big section on our disaster communications since we respond to disasters quite frequently. And then there's a little bit about metrics and reporting at the end. So these are the draft goals and objectives that we've come up with. And I definitely would love feedback if there's anything kind of strange or something that might be missing. But the main goals of our communication and outreach plan is to enhance the visibility, impact, and brand recognition of Two Rivers in our region, increase the trust of stakeholders in the abilities of Two Rivers, provide expertise on a variety of planning topics and issues, and improve internal coordination with Two Rivers staff and externally with partners. So to achieve these goals, I've come up with the following objectives. So to establish a consistent message platform that is flexible enough to be used through a variety of communications and outreach methods. And then there's a big long list of, some of the items that we can hit. Create a reliable and recognized system for sharing information, and develop an action plan that is tailored towards the needs of target audiences to ensure the regular, consistent, and pertinent exchange of information. So how do we know if this plan succeeds once it gets adopted? So in the plan, I've pulled together baseline metrics of all of our websites, our social media, newsletters, and some of the other outreach activities that we work on. So the metrics include things like, how many people visit our website on a daily, monthly basis over the past year, how many likes or followers we have on social media, how often do we interact with people liking our posts, sharing our posts, or even tagging us and things on Facebook. Newsletters, so the baseline metrics are, how many people subscribe to a newsletter, how many people actually open the newsletters that we send. And then some of our other outreach activities that we do want to start tracking is, something as simple as like how many people are attending our, any sort of webinar or trainings that we do, how many people we interact with, things like that. We do want to conduct a municipal survey. So that is something that we're going to send to town officials to ask them how they perceive Two Rivers and how we could better help them and how well we're communicating with them. And work that we're currently doing in their towns, or stuff that we could be doing better. So I think that's something that we wanted to hit sometime this summer, maybe in the fall. And then starting going forward, we do want to provide the board with just like a quarterly metric report that kind of shows that baseline metric and measures how much we've improved our outreach within a 3-month period. So we definitely want to start with these 3 items at the beginning. So yeah, that was just a brief presentation about it. If anybody would like to view the entire plan, I think it's about 15 pages long. Feel free to email me. My last day at Two Rivers is March 18th, so you at least have 3 more weeks of me left to talk about this or any of the other projects I might be working with you all on. But I guess I will open it up to like any questions, comments, or ideas that I might not have mentioned, but people would like to see.
Thanks, Tori. I'm glad you're going to still be hanging around, and I know you have a lot of friends in my neighborhood.
Yes, I was just at dinner with your son the other night.
Anybody have any comments or questions about the outreach? Okay, well, on behalf of everybody at Two Rivers, Tori, I just want to tell you what a joy it's been to have you working with us. You've done wonderful work, and you've been a good, bright, shining star in our midst. So I think it's been fun, but we'll still see you there with all your animals and everything else. And I'm sure to see you around here with all my kids. So it's been fun, and
Thanks,
we'll
Bill.
continue. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move right along then. I'm going to pull up my agenda. I think we're now down at staff and commissioner updates. Does anybody on the commission, any members of the commission have any items that they would like to bring up at this point? Any special things going on in your town? Of nope. All right, then I'll turn it over to Kevin, Peter rather, with the legislative update.
Thank you, Bill. I'm just going to touch on the many things that are happening up at the State House. It's all pretty much virtual, but it's a hybrid, obviously, in the House. So I think the things I want to mention are kind of building off some of the stuff that Kevin and Jeff talked about in their plan presentations. And one is the Bylaw Modernization Program, which was a grant program started last year to help towns evaluate their zoning bylaws to make changes that would enable more housing development. It looks as though a second year is going to be coming, at least out of the Senate Economic Development Committee. I testified on that just today. So that's a good thing. Another 500,000, I think, is what the committee is looking at. I think that should pretty much enable all the towns in our region that weren't able to access those funds this year to have a chance to do so next year. So I would certainly, I'll keep you posted, make sure that it goes, but it's something we'll remind you to look at when it does pass. Municipal planning grants in the Budget Adjustment Act. As I mentioned to you, I had proposed that the House Appropriations put in $250,000 for additional municipal planning grants to fund many of those that didn't get funded in the normal round last year. And I guess the Budget Adjustment Act has closed and that is still in there, so that's good news. We've been testifying a lot on housing bills to kind of implement the Keys to the Valley project. Kevin's provided some testimony to me and I provided some more today. There will be a housing bill of some sort. It's taking the lead in the Senate, and then it'll go over to the House. Act 250, that's always a perennial issue to be dealt with. The housing bill actually has a few Act 250 things in it, but the general overhaul of Act 250 in the House is taking a completely different track that the Senate is taking, and the administration up until just in the last week or so was pretty much AWOL as to what they wanted to see. So it's quite a mess on Act 250, but like we always say, there's always next year, I'm afraid. Brownfields, the Regional Planning Commission's got $1 million last year for assessments, and we're going to be seeking about $2 million this year, because by the end of June, the Regional Planning Commissions will have encumbered that $1 million already. And Sarah in our office has been seeking approval for a lot of that new funding and just is moving through it on projects that are really important in our region. So it's a good thing. VTrans is proposing each RPC develop a regional bike and pedestrian plan that'll feed into the state with priority projects. That's part of the agency's interest in complete streets and their energy targets. So that should be moving forward. Energy plan money. We've been testifying in House Energy and Technology about a continuation of the general energy implementation money that Two Rivers and other regional planning commissions got. Stephen Bauer in our office is using that funding to help a number of communities directly. So we're seeking that. Plus, as Gary mentioned, there is a municipal resilience bill H518, which I think was on the calendar today for second reading. And that's to do weatherization and energy system switchovers in municipal buildings. And the regional planning commissions would be paid to help towns conduct audits and then to be able to access a grant program that the Buildings and General Services Department will have for actually implementing these projects. So that's
There's $45 million in there for that, according to Ben Welch.
Yep. That $45 million for the grant program and $2.4 million for the regional planning commission spread over 2 years. So it's a good investment. So, we're continuing to help towns with ARPA. Obviously, they have a fair amount of time to decide how to use it and then to actually expend it, 2026. Sarah Raitt in our office is kind of the ARPA expert as far as following the Treasury rules and working with the League of Cities and Towns on what is eligible and what's not. And I would like to put in a plug, I believe tomorrow night at 6:30, Kevin, I think Two Rivers is conducting an ARPA meeting with town officials, select boards and energy and planning commissions and town officials, not the general public. You should have gotten an invitation about that too. And then the infrastructure bill that passed down in Washington, it was primarily authorization. So we're still waiting for appropriations at the federal level, and the federal budget, I think, is getting close. I think they have another continuing resolution till March 11th. So hopefully by then, the federal government will have a budget. It'll be funding a lot of the things in the ARPA, in the infrastructure bill, and we'll be off and running there. But it's interesting how the legislature and state agencies are looking at regional planning commissions in such a big way to implement a lot of the things that they feel we're uniquely suited to be doing. So we're working with nonprofits, we're working closely with the league on a number of initiatives, and trying to do the best we can to keep our towns aware of what's going on at a time when things are moving very quickly. So that's a quick few minute summary of some of the things I've been working on, and but I'm glad to take any questions, or either now or anytime, about legislative issues.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Bill.
Anybody have any final thoughts? Say we're running down at the bottom of the agenda list here. I think
Just
that was the- Yeah.
Bill, I wanted to note that if anybody's interested in that ARPA thing, if you just go to our main webpage, you'll see it right down the bottom, how to get there.
Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Does anybody have any other thoughts or comments you'd like to share with us before we part? If not, then yes, Paul.
I just wanted to mention that the town of Bethel suffered a tremendous loss here this week. Any of you who know Tim Mills, who was the director of our water and sewer department for almost 30 years, passed away on Monday. And it's a tremendous loss for the town and for his friends and family. And it's just hard to replace someone who's their expertise, but also their friendship and what he meant. He was highly decorated, awarded in his field, and we're certainly going to miss him in that spot.
Thank you for mentioning that. That's always a hard thing to swallow when you have somebody that's been in your town, practically family, that's given so much and so well loved. That's a very good tribute. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? It looks like we might be ready for a motion to adjourn. I think we've covered everything. Peter, thank you, and Kevin, and Jeff, and Tori. Gonna miss you, Tori. So anyway, I think I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. We'll all go have dinner.
So moved.
Thank you, everybody. Hi there.
Drive carefully.
Okay, take care,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you. Well done.
Bye-bye.